early settlers of Maine put the Penobscot River to work immediately. First as a trade corridor, then a log drive to move timber to ever-expanding towns and cities. Next came the dams, all up and down the 109 miles of the river and its tributaries. Dams that became concrete walls, choking off salmon, shad, sturgeon, and other species that were a vital food source that fed the Penobscot people. The 20th century drew pulp and chemical mills belching mercury and other toxins so hazardous sections of the river were depleted of oxygen. Epic runs of sea-run fish were reduced to a trickle. The fish that did manage the journey upriver were rendered too toxic to eat. By the 1970s, the Penobscot River, for all intents and purposes, had stopped functioning like a river. But not all is lost on Maine's biggest river. In the last half-century, something truly remarkable has occurred on the Penobscot. An unlikely partnership of people and organizations have restored a river, literally brought it back to life. Nothing quite like it had ever been done on a river in North America. The Penobscot is living proof that rivers can be restored, that there's value in them being wild again. I'm Kristen Knoll, and this is the Saving Salmon podcast. I've done a bit of work on Maine's rivers, and I've been really lucky to tour the Penobscot and the streams and rivers that flow into it. I even got to see the sites of where all of the major dams used to stand. It's quite special to see how it's regained its former diversity and life. It's really been a remarkable journey for the river. And to document it, we sent Bob Keating to Maine to meet the people involved in the restoration.
Yes, Kristen, and what I found out when I went to Maine is that you can turn a river around, that it can restore itself quite quickly if the will is there. They don't have to be dead things forever. Natural systems will return, and they'll return much faster than on land.
I've seen it with my own eyes, and while I didn't work directly on the Penobscot restoration itself, I've been proud to support community engagement efforts on some of its tributaries. I am going to quibble about how fast people say it happened. This was decades of work.
Yeah, so I discovered. But after all that initial trust building, I guess you'd call it, and negotiating and signing of contracts and the actual buying of dams, the river did what it had to do to revitalize itself.
I can't wait to hear all about it.
How you doing, Bucky Owen? Good to see you. You from BC?
I am.
Okay. We have two Canadian granddaughters in Ontario.
I begin by meeting Bucky Owen at the end of a narrow road on French Island in Old Town, Maine. The island has a cluster of historic, quaint wood homes and is surrounded by the Penobscot River. Bucky's getting ready to fish here for shad off a rocky point.
Watch your head. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Bucky puts a fly in his line and locks up his electric car. It looks to me like he's blocking the entrance to the point. On this track so narrow you could almost reach out and touch the houses on either side of it. But Bucky says he has this arrangement in the neighborhood.
What I do with these house owners here, several ladies, I usually kill only 2 shad a year, and usually females, big ones. And I make about 20 fish cakes from each shad. And I come over here, I package them up, and then I give one to each of these homeowners for letting me park here. There we are, ready to go fishing.
Bucky's 88 years old, but looks at least a decade younger. He has this infectious laugh.
Where are the shad? Oh dear.
The Penobscot has swelled with heavy spring rain, and Bucky has trouble casting his fly out in the current, but he is determined and he's confident he'll catch fish.
Oop, that was a rock. This is one of the best smallmouth fisheries in the whole country, and it still is. And that's been
Bucky Owen is somewhat of a legend in the conservation world in Maine. He's dedicated his working life to restoring rivers, along with the creatures that depend on them to survive.
I was involved in leading the restoration of bald eagles here in Maine, starting back about 1970. At that time, we had 29 pair that produced 6 young. We now have close to 1,000 pair, producing 1,000 to 1,500 young. So quite a change.
So you've been at this conservation thing a long time.
Yeah, well, I came in '68 to join the wildlife department at the University of Maine. And then after 30 years there, I was asked to come down and head up the Fish and Wildlife Department.
Bucky ran the Fish and Wildlife Department for about 4 years, until the river he now fishes drew him in to deeper conservation water.
When the proposal to breach Vanguard Dam occurred, I got involved in that. And then there was a huge proposal for a new dam at what they call Basin Mills. And basically because of the fishermen, I think mostly, that was eventually abandoned. And it was just fortuitous, and ASF was I think the key organization in pulling this off, that and the Penobscot Nation. There were several dams going to be relicensed, and so we were involved in writing our congressional people and supporting the NGOs. So that's when the idea came up to sit down and look at the whole river as a system.
This was a new concept, considering the river's health as a whole, not just one dam or even one conservation project at a time. I live next to one of the most dammed up river systems in the world. The power from those dams did help build my corner of British Columbia, but ecologically there was a price, and it's a steep one. Everything changes: the shoreline, the flow of the river, the wildlife around it, even birds and bugs. Migratory fish populations often just collapse. Removing dams is an equally radical act, an attempt to reverse decades or even centuries of damage. The first major dam removal in Maine was not on the Penobscot River. It was on the nearby Kennebec in 1999. And many people, I don't think, were prepared for what was about to happen, as bells rang and Bucky cheered.
So with the ringing of a ceremonial bell that signaled the backhoe, the temporary cofferdam was pulled away and the Kennebec River was opened to flow around the Edwards Dam. And incidentally, cracking
This all started when we took the Edwards Dam out of the Kennebec, which is in Augusta. And there was they were saying the fish would come back in I don't know, maybe a month or something like that. And I said, they'll be back in minutes. And just as they were breaching the dam, a sturgeon came right out of water. And I said, no, it might be seconds. And there was somebody put a great big sign up there on a sheet hanging off the bridge, said, "Welcome back" to the fish.
This was groundbreaking stuff 26 years ago. Removing a dam takes the river and communities back. In the case of the Kennebec, 2 centuries back. But it worked wonderfully. And with such success on the Kennebec, Bucky and many others turned their attention to the Penobscot, once one of the greatest salmon rivers on the Atlantic coast.
Salmon are carrying to some extent, the restoration from a dollar standpoint because they're an endangered species. So they're eligible for a lot of money. But the real benefit, I think, to this river is the river herring and the shad and the lamprey eels, the striped bass. All of those species have just skyrocketed, and the sturgeon, which are endangered. All of those species have skyrocketed in the river, and they'll just continue to increase. So it's miraculous. I love it.
The sound that you hear in the background is the machinery that has started to pound down the Great Works Dam. This is June 11th. It's been a fabulous celebration so far, but what's in store once this dam comes down is just thousands and thousands more fish coming up this river. That's what we're celebrating here today. We're celebrating the Penobscot.
We lost the power on these 3 dams, basically, but we ended up producing more power overall, plus restoring a river. I mean, it's just miraculous. I never thought I would be casting for a shad in my lifetime, frankly. In fact, back in the 70s, I didn't think there'd be any fish in here. The river was so polluted back then. We had 6 paper mills on the river. There's not a one now.
Restoration on the Penobscot brought together an unlikely coalition of people. The Penobscot Nation, a half-dozen conservation groups, as well as individuals, formed what was called the Penobscot River Restoration Trust. They lobbied government, talked with people who live around the river, and raised money, lots of money. Then they did something they'd never done before. Negotiated to actually buy 3 of the largest dams on the river, removing 2 of the biggest, the VZ Dam and the Great Works, and building a fish bypass around a 3rd. That work opened up nearly 1,000 miles of historic habitat to endangered Atlantic salmon and other sea-run fish.
I would have liked to seen additional dams probably taken out, but there has to be a balance. Yeah? And I think this was a good balance.
Did you get pushback?
Oh yeah. There were people. Butch Phillips, who was one of the elders for the Penobscot Nation, the 2 of us gave a number of programs to all the towns, and we had people that said, "You should never take a single dam out of that river. That is a renewable energy supply, and we should not be messing with it." And so we had to some extent, some of those people never got convinced, but when we were able to show that in the long run, the dollars that they're receiving from us, in quotes, are going to revitalize the energy production in other parts of the river. So it was a win-win situation.
Is there ever a time when you're done or no?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think our intervention is to monitor and make sure that things aren't done that will really harm what we've been able to achieve. So monitoring the system, making sure something doesn't occur that's going to harm the water quality or the fisheries is important. But the major part of the work is done. And I think we're just here to enjoy the life that's here.
Catch a few shad.
Amen.
I want to see the dam removal sites in person for myself. So I travel from French Island upriver a short distance to another island, a bigger one, the Penobscot Indian Island Reservation.
I grew up just south of the reservation here, within the Penobscot watershed, kind of along the banks of the Penobscot stream. Grew up fishing, that section of river quite a bit. I'd fish up here a little bit too when I'd come up and visit.
The Penobscot inhabited what is now Maine for thousands of years, and Chuck Loring has agreed to give me a tour. Chuck worked in forestry before becoming the Penobscot's Director of Natural Resources. He tells me he has a daughter, coincidentally named River, as he shows me the river the Penobscot once relied on.
Pre-contact, a third of our diet was salmon from the river. Also, we used the alewife, shad as well. Those fish were consumed, but the alewife are also kind of used as a garden fertilizer. in a couple different methods, Some people would trench out and put the alewife in the trenches and let them decompose naturally that way, but also some people would kind of make like a slurry of fertilizer out of the fish. And they were obviously very numerous back then. I mean, today in the Penobscot, there's 6 million alewife just about that have passed last year. You can just imagine, pre-contact what the fish numbers were like.
Safe to say they were an integral part of the Penobscot people.
Yes, they were very important to our existence, especially in this fishing community here where we are today.
We stop at a small gravel parking lot and take a short hike to the river's edge.
All right, so now we're going to walk down here to the Great Works dam removal site. Anticipate we'll see some alewife. Probably might even see a couple shad underneath there, and maybe if we're lucky we'll see a salmon, but we'll see what we find out here. I usually it's pretty steep, so I try to hang on to some of the brush around.
As we make our way to the river, I see evidence of the old Great Works Dam. The decommissioning of the Great Works and VZ dams took a full decade and a half to negotiate and complete, but it truly transformed the river from where I'm standing.
It was a pretty big undertaking. I wasn't really a part of that project specifically, just because I was working as a forester at the time for us. But I do remember going down to the Great Works removal, and it was pretty amazing to see all the partners there, that sense of community with the other, our non-tribal partners and non-government partners and federal partners and state partners as well. It was moving to see that amount of collaboration to make something like this happen.
How often do you see salmon now, Chuck?
I feel like pretty frequently. I mean, we'll see them kind of surfacing down at Eddington quite a bit when we're striper fishing. Down here, if it was a little bit sunnier and especially with polarized glasses, you can really, sometimes you can see them. There's something just boiled right there, actually.
A welcome sight?
Definitely a welcome sight for sure. It's, I don't know, it always kind of makes me excited when we see fish like that when we're out, especially striper fishing and stuff. It's, it's just really, really moving to be able to see what, theoretically is a wild fish returning here, with limited numbers for so long. It's just a welcome sight to be able to welcome them back for sure.
We drive to the Milford Dam, which was not removed, but a fish lift was added along with cameras. Chuck wants to show me the alewife, a species of herring low on the trophic scale, but critical to the health of the river.
This camera is inside the dam here on the fish lift, the fish elevator. It shows all the fish as they pass through. They have different sorting gates that they can open up. I'm not a biologist, so I don't have a lot of knowledge of how the gates and stuff work here, but I can see fish. So.
A lot of them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's, I think last week there's the count's right there. Actually, total catch to date is a little over 1 million. I want to say it was pretty close to 900 and something thousand last week alone. So it's just starting really, but they're just a really good indicator of passage and a good system. I feel like all these co-evolved species kind of need to return. They provide a pretty good prey buffer for, right now we're going to start seeing out migrating smolts pretty soon here, and they'll be in the river, with those. So, and the striped bass will definitely key in on these alewife here. And they are an indicator of a healthier river system.
You sell them by the bushel? How much do they get in a bushel now?
$50 tray we'll get.
Yeah. How many in a tray?
2.
2 bushels?
Yeah.
Ecologist Andy Good points out the impact of a healthier fishery. He takes me to a tributary called Mill Creek, and alewife are running. A seasonal fisherman has a box net and has been catching alewife for a couple weeks, selling them in buckets right from the bank of the creek. Alewife are prized by lobster fishermen and used as bait, and turns out Andy uses them too and buys a couple buckets.
Well, I have a recreational license for lobster traps, so my son and I have 7 pots. We do it for probably 5 weeks early in the summer, and then again in the fall a little bit. But it's a blast to do. But
Yeah.
Is that mostly who comes for the alewives?
That's all that comes. Lobstermen.
Lobster.
It's all lobster bait.
I remember I was here once
And
there was
halibut bait.
yeah, so a guy was fishing halibut. I thought that was fascinating.
Andy is also a veteran of the Maine conservation world. Like Bucky Owen, he began working on river systems in Maine and New England when the dams were still there and most fish species were in trouble. He's worked for the Atlantic Salmon Federation for 27 years.
I used to work for the Nature Conservancy, and I'm an ecologist in my background, but I'm also a fisherman. So I had been salmon fishing, since I was a younger child. So I always had an interest, not just in, straight conservation, but also fishing and hunting and the sportsman angle of it. So
that I find is pretty typical in the conservation world. Often the most effective leaders and organizations, for that matter, are hunters or anglers who have a vested interest in the species they're trying to save. Andy tells me it was changes in regulation and attitude that led to success on the Penobscot, and it all began in the 1990s.
Maine used to have a regulated hydropower industry, and all the prices were artificially high and fixed. In the 1990s, Maine's utility industry deregulated. So all of a sudden these dams were being bought and sold on the open market. So we had out of state and out of country energy producers come into Maine and start buying these dams. And this, with the new ownership, it created new opportunities for dialogue. And we, again, where our history of fighting these folks on the river, a lot of the same people were then hired by these new hydropower companies coming into Maine. And these people were sick of fighting. They wanted to find sort of a solution on the river. We wanted to find a solution on the river. We had developed relationships, even though it might have been antagonistic. Over time, we had developed relationships with the hydropower folks. And so we decided to have some closed-door meetings to see where we could find some common ground.
And common ground turned out to be actually buying 3 of the dams.
Right. It was a common ground, really, for everybody. It was a balance. We both agreed that, we were just seeking balance on the river. We weren't trying to remove every dam. We were just trying to remove the dams most harmful to Atlantic salmon and other migratory fish. The company approached it from the same angle. With the change in federal laws and the deregulation of the industry here in Maine, they realized that they had to find a balance on the river, that it wasn't always going to be just about energy generation or economics on the river. So with that common ground, we were able to start a dialogue. Thank you.
No, thank you.
This is awesome.
See PSA.
I will.
Andy buys the alewife for his lobster traps. This small seasonal fishery is expected to last another couple weeks and help support the much more lucrative coastal lobster fishery. Andy says having enough alewife and other species to support a commercial and recreational fishery took a lot of collaboration.
The Atlantic Salmon Federation, for the first 2 years, we started the project and developed it, and then once we saw that there was an opportunity here, we knew this project was a lot bigger than just salmon and a lot bigger than what the Atlantic Salmon Federation could do. And so we reached out to some of our partners in the state of Maine, like the Natural Resources Council of Maine, the Nature Conservancy, Trout Unlimited. And so we brought in other groups and then created the Penobscot River Restoration Trust, which was a nonprofit designed to negotiate, sign a deal, take ownership, and remove these dams.
What would you say was responsible for such success for such a divergent group of people or organization?
To be an effective partnership, we all had to leave our identities at the door. If the project got done, there'd be plenty of credit for everyone. But we had to work together. We had to share donors. We had to share fundraising, something these groups don't usually do. But we also had a model in that on the Kennebec before, a lot of these groups had worked together to remove the Edwards Dam on the Kennebec. We used that model a little bit, but expanded it in the Penobscot. to essentially, purchase and remove the dams on the Penobscot.
The Penobscot, in many ways, has become the model for this type of ecological work, yes?
Yes, it didn't start out that way, and it was never necessarily intended, but that's how it ended up. We got into this project, we never realized it would be 15 years between when we started negotiating, signed an agreement, and then actually remove these dams. But it took a long time. It took a lot of partnerships, groups working collaboratively together, divergent interests, the sporting community, the conservation community, the hydropower company as well, to find a sort of a solution. So it was private and public interest sort of working together, and in the end, we achieved something that none of us could have achieved individually. For the first 2 years, we started the project and developed it, and then once we saw that there was an opportunity here, we knew this project was a lot bigger than just salmon and a lot bigger than what the Atlantic Salmon Federation could do.
Laura, how are you?
Andy, I'm great.
All
How
right.
are you? It's been a long time.
I know, it has been.
Andy introduces me to Laura Rose Day. They're old friends who were involved in conservation on the Penobscot and the Kennebec for decades. Both are now nearing retirement, but are justifiably proud of what the Penobscot River Restoration Trust has achieved.
I think that the trust itself worked well because the Penobscot Nation and the Atlantic Salmon Federation and the organizations that were involved in it all brought different strengths at different times over a project that took about 15 years and were willing to work together that way.
What do you credit as being the major factors for the success of the project?
A really effective collaboration between groups that brought different strengths to the table. That was, I think, a really key factor. The leadership of the Penobscot Nation and every chief of the Penobscot Nation, and there were several during the course of a long project, just put 100% into making the project success a priority.
What would you like to see in the next 5 years then, or even beyond?
I'd like to see a culture around river resources. If you're in Maine, you can't escape the fact that our rivers and streams are, you'll hear it over and over, the lifeblood, right, of the state. So that's true. If we can develop culture, in our communities and throughout our state, an understanding and also just almost a culture of caring for these river systems and all of the things that they bring to us, that's what I would like to see.
If you had one hope for the future, what would it be?
That people will care by demonstrating the success we've had, by working cooperatively with local communities, by folks seeing these fisheries come back, seeing these rivers being used for canoe races again, the rivers cleaned up. We've made so much progress in such a short time, really 25 years. We have over 20 million river herring coming back from really maybe 2 million 25 years ago. We just need to keep up the pace of restoration. We've seen that if you can open up the habitat, the fisheries will take care of themselves. The fish will come back, they'll spawn. We have a lot of great habitat here in Maine and in New England. We just need to give the fish a chance. And that's what we've been doing over the last 25 years. We just need to continue that and broaden public support for this work.
Wow, Bob, it sounds like you had quite the journey to the Penobscot.
It was an eye-opener and a really, really interesting trip, and Maine's beautiful as well.
Did anything surprise you?
Two things surprised me. The depth of the loss of habitat in rivers along the Atlantic coast was a shock to me. I didn't realize just how dire the situation is for Atlantic rivers and the species that rely on them. The second is better news, and that's how resilient these river systems are and how with will, hard work, planning, and plenty of money, it can be turned around. They're never going to be the wild rivers they were 200 years ago, but they can become functional rivers that support fish. And the speed with which they bounce back, this is both the Kennebec and the Penobscot, I found truly remarkable.
Oh yeah, I loved hearing Bucky Owen's story of the Edwards Dam coming down and a sturgeon rising out of the water right at that moment.
I was also interested in the story Bucky told me about French Island and the homes there that used to be on the edge of this stagnant, smelly pool. Since the removal of the Vesey and Great Works dams, they're now on the edge of a functioning river system they can enjoy, they can fish, perhaps even swim in, and their property is worth far more because of it. So there's an economic angle to all this as well.
And the work is far from over.
Yeah, there's tributaries that need to be worked on, that are being worked on. Andy Good called them the veins of the system leading into the main artery of the main stem of the Penobscot. The river is also polluted because of a buildup of mercury over the centuries, and the government, in fact, in Maine, does not recommend people eat more than 2 fish a month and says pregnant women shouldn't eat any at all, which says a ton to me. Also, work on the Penobscot has been good for all species, but salmon haven't returned in numbers like alewife, shad, or striped bass. So there's work to be done there. And there are other dams, too, that could potentially be decommissioned, opening up yet more fish passage. So yeah, there's lots more work to do.
The project that is probably the most memorable to me is the Dover Foxcroft Dam project on the Piscataquis River, which is one of those veins that flows into the Penobscot. We did quite a bit of research and outreach with the town, and we developed materials that showed pros and cons of removing versus keeping the dam. The town had to vote on whether to keep it, and at the time, they voted to keep it, which was disappointing. But we kept working, and they recently did a revote back in the spring, about a year after the original vote, and they voted to remove the dam, which is great news for salmon and other migratory fish, and I think it's great news for the local community too.
Yes, it is, and that's the type of work that does need to carry on. I'm going to leave you with a piece of an interview I did with Molly Payne-Wynn, the director of freshwater programs with the Nature Conservancy. The Conservancy played a huge role in Penobscot restoration, and the Kennebec too. And one of the questions I put to Molly was what she would like to see happen, say, in the next 5 years on the river.
I hope that the Penobscot River restoration work to date has changed people and will continue to inspire people over the next 5 years as a symbol of a means to acknowledge Indigenous sovereignty, really inspire like collaborative action. And I hope that over the next 5 years, we continue to do that. Like we continue to strengthen partnerships and bring resources to bear and get boots on the ground to remove barriers in the tributaries and continue to sort of build on the momentum, because there's still a lot of work to be done on the Penobscot and the sort of main tributaries like the Piscataquis River, for example. And I think there's so much potential for significant change and impacts happening in the next 5 years. So my hope is that we can stick with it.
Return of salmon?
There's a lot of hope. I think the sort of collective group of folks in the state of Maine that are working on salmon restoration, I think we recognize that there are fewer places that exist on the East Coast for us to make an impact in restoring wild runs of Atlantic salmon in the world. And I think the Penobscot River rises to the top as one of those places where we are working and we've seen fish coming back and we know they're there. And if we can keep our focus, my hope is that it will continue to make an impact for Atlantic salmon.
Thank you for listening to the Saving Salmon podcast, a podcast produced by the Atlantic Salmon Federation. You can get more information and episodes on our website, www.asf.ca, or wherever you get your podcasts.